Alright guys, welcome back. I'm doing another one of these episodes of a new series where I go and make a case on why someone deserves to be on the Mount Rushmore of slashers. We all know the original three of Michael Myers, Freddy Krueger, and Jason Voorhees, but that fourth spot is never set in stone, so to say. So in this series, I'm going to go through a bunch of people, and today I'm going to try to build a case for Ghostface. Ghostface is the main killer in the entire Scream franchise. A franchise that debuted back in December of 1996 and became an instant hit. To the point where in 1997 they had to put out number 2, and in 2000 they closed out the trilogy. But as we've seen recently, in the 2011, we got part 4. And in 2022, we got a 5th installment, followed up immediately with a 6th installment in 2023. And as the news has came out more recently, we have another installment that is supposed to begin shooting in the beginning of 2024 for Scream's first ever Halloween season release with Scream 7. Along the way, we have had a TV series as well that spanned a total of 3 seasons. And Ghostface, like I said, has been the particular killer in all of these. So, kicking it off, he's had 48 total kills in all 6 movies. I'm not going through the TV series on here too much, and I'm not counting the kills from that as well, because other than the 3rd season, Ghostface didn't look like this. He had a completely different look for some reason. I don't really know the reasoning behind it. I do know that Mr. Weinstein, who owns the rights, I guess, to the Scream franchise, did not want a tie between the movies and this show. So that probably had something to do with it. But then season 3 came out and they wore the traditional mask. So that is going to be the first thing. Is there's 48 kills in 6 movies. That's an average of 8 kills a movie, which is a pretty good amount of kills per runtime. So we can't really scoff at that. The kills themselves might not always be the most inventive, but these are supposed to be real people in this costume killing people. Sometimes they use guns, sometimes they use knives. So most of the time they use knives. I mean, it was the original weapon was a butchering, like a gutter hunting knife, and that's kind of what the series is stuck with, is sticking with that same weapon. It's a nice weapon. And for some of the kills, they do get up close and personal, and it does seem like it's a little bit more brutal than, let's say, shooting somebody with a harpoon gun. That's from a distance. Using magical powers. Using the knife, you have to get up close and personal, and then we also have the fact that Ghostface is not a supernatural killer. So these are real human beings getting up close, personal, and as we've seen in the most recent installments, much more brutal with the knife killing. So overall, I do think they could be a little more inventive with the kills in this franchise, but they're still pretty solid kills, and they generally don't shy away from the amount of blood they're using. Except part 3, but there was reasons for that go above and beyond us as fans liking it. The series itself, over the course of 6 movies, has grossed over $900 million. Think about that. 6 movies, over $900 million. With a 7th one coming, they're going to eclipse over $1 billion. Made just off of Ghostface. Also, back in 1996, when Scream came onto the scene with Ghostface himself, it revitalized the entire slasher horror genre. At that point, horror slashers had kind of gotten a little stale, and we were starting to get likes of Freddy versus, not Freddy versus Jason yet, but like Freddy's Dead. We did start to get into the Halloween 5 and 6s we were getting. Friday the 13th had started eclipsing, Manhattan and the final chapter. It's just, Candyman was a really good one that came out then. Chucky was kind of doing his thing. But for the most part, Child's Play 3 had kind of ended. There wasn't a whole lot coming out in slashers, and they just weren't as popular as they had been for the runtime of the 80s. But that was an entire decade of slasher movies non-stop coming out. So Scream was a nice little jolt and shot in the arm, and it kicked off, this franchise. The teenagers being chased by someone, and we're going to go for young, trying to make it a very good looking cast, kind of became a theme. We got movies like The Faculty, we got I Still Know What You Did Last Summer, we got Urban Legends, and Scream is probably the most successful franchise ever based on a whodunit. So we take this titular character of Ghostface, which is a person in a costume, and we never know who the killer is until the final reveal at the end. And that's kind of what's been the fun of Scream, and that's most people's biggest thing, is when you come out and you see the new trailer, you start looking at, who's casted in this movie? All right, maybe we can put together the dots and figure out who the killer is. It kind of makes it a fun game for the audience, which is also part of what Scream is. Scream also went meta. Other movies had tried to do it, kind of, and it didn't really work, but with Scream, it hit. You had them talking about horror movies. So it's not like, this doesn't exist in this universe. No, all the movies prior to this movie all exist. And then on top of that, you have Randy, the key character, who sets up the rules to survive a slasher, which we all watching slashers know this, and that makes it fun because it's letting us in on the secret. Also, there's a huge amount of references and homages back to the heyday of slashers. You get some Halloween references. You get, obviously, Nightmare on Elm Street references, because Wes Craven is the one who created this whole monster of Scream. And he did direct the first 4 movies. But this whole meta-universe all kind of kicked off and started to where that's the only kind of movies that we were getting in horror was, you want a horror movie to be good? Yes, you have to have kills, but you also have to have meta humor in it. And that's one thing that Scream, for the most part, in all their movies, have done a very good job with, is setting up humor to go with the horror. So having a nice, perfect balance, and that's in pretty much all the movies. The only one I could think of where I didn't really think the humor landed a whole lot because it got a little too goofy was in the 3rd one. But other than that, it has great humor in it. The next thing I would say is chase scenes. Chase scenes are probably what Scream is known for, besides obviously Ghostface. But Ghostface himself has very intense chase scenes, and probably some of the best chase scenes in all of horror, starting with the first one and even continuing all the way up until the 6th one that just came out this year. They're always intense. The killer makes smart decisions. Sometimes your antagonists there, your people getting murdered, don't make a good decision, and sometimes they make intelligent decisions. And that's the nice part about the characters in the show or the movies, is that they're not written dumb. Scream is a very smart franchise, and they write their characters very smart. And smart characters in front of smart horror fans makes us all kind of feel a little bit good inside, because we see so many movies where characters make the worst possible decisions to get themselves into these situations, which, yeah, we wanted to see the situation, but I mean, couldn't you come up with a better reason to get there? Scream does that. The writing is phenomenal. The directing is phenomenal. These movies have great storylines, even when they're being written on the spot. They're still pretty good. Scream 2 and Scream 3 a little bit, but that one was all written a little bit different. Didn't have Kevin Williamson, but having a good director and a good writer definitely helps, since these movies are meta. They do hit meta humor. They also are written very smart. But one thing that the Scream franchise does do is it tackles whatever is going on in that movie in horror at the time. So the first Scream movie was all about slasher movies and how to survive that. The second one was all about sequels, where they're bigger, body counts higher. The third one was about a trilogy and how it always pulls back to the original to complete the story. Then they went on a hiatus for a long time, and then there was a bunch of these remakes coming out, so then they made a fourth one, kind of poking fun at remakes. Then the fifth one waited a while before it came out, and then there was this new craze of requels, where we're going to make a new movie, but it's going to be set directly after the original one, no matter when it came out. And that's what Scream 5 poked fun at. And then Scream 6, I was not a big fan of Scream 6, but Ghostface was awesome in it, so there's that. The reveals, not as much, but the portrayal of Ghostface himself throughout the film was very good. Trying to do a little bit more for him is the Fun World mask. So the peanut-eyed ghost mask, the fantastic faces that they were making at the time, came out in 1991, and obviously they sold some because it's a Halloween costume, but it wasn't huge and popular. And now, since Scream, the Ghostface costume is the most sold and most wore costume in the United States since it came out. So trying to prove why a horror character deserves to be on the Mount Rushmore, he is the most worn costume in the United States. Freddy, Jason, Michael Myers, clowns like Pennywise, even people dressing up like Chucky, Hellraiser with Pinhead. None of these people even come close to Ghostface. The Ghostface character of Scream also helped kick off what was called the Scary Movie franchise. The first one is a direct ripoff of Scream and a few other movies of that time, but it mainly rips off Scream. And it is a horror comedy, not really horror at all. It's just a spoof movie making fun of it by the Wayans brothers. And they would go on to I believe, 5 scary movies. But this whole taking like popular movies of a genre and making your own comedy spin on it, they had done before, but it never hit until Scary Movie. Scary Movie became so popular that it actually stayed in theaters for, I want to say it was like 6 months, because I remember when I was in high school I went and seen it, and then I went and seen it like 6 months later because it was still in theaters, and it was a hilarious movie, but that was because I loved Scream so much, therefore I love this comedy spoof off from it. Ghostface himself has also made his way onto The Simpsons. Yes, we had a whole Halloween episode of The Simpsons where there was a bunch of people wearing Ghostface costumes. He's also made his way into video games. Dead by Daylight. He was a certain character you could play, and they made a whole trailer for it and everything else to kind of showcase it. And then Call of Duty. Call of Duty last year, maybe it was the year before, for Black Ops. It came up with on the Nukem where you had 2 people who were picked randomly to be Ghostface, and the other people had to hide while Ghostface chased after him and tried to stab him to death. And then Scream more recently did get a brand new game by Funko where you play the game of Scream. So in that sense, Scream has kind of made its way past just horror movies and horror fans. You don't have to be a horror movie fan to know who Ghostface is. Obviously, if you want to go out anywheres on any Halloween, you're going to see at least one of these costumes running around to get candy. Being that he's made it into cartoons, he's made it into video games, which is ironic that Call of Duty is a shooter game and a slasher character made it in. And Dead by Daylight, still not a slasher game, but we have a slasher villain who makes his way on there. I know he's not the only one who's made it into video games, but it's still kind of neat that this character is considered big enough to do that. The last thing I'm going to bring up is to why Ghostface deserves to be there on the Mount Rushmore is probably the fact that this is the most consistent franchise there is in horror. Now, I know I said Chucky had not really any duds that he had pulled out of the tank there for his movies, but Scream 1 is still considered one of the best slasher movies ever made. It came out at the right time. You can go visit it today, and it still holds up. Scream 2 as a sequel is still a very good movie and a very successful sequel. Scream 3, which a lot of people consider to be the worst one out of this franchise, is still a well above average film. In all of these movies, the acting is what sells it. For the most part, whoever the killer reveal is, they do a great job in their killer reveal as well as in their regular parts of acting. The mainstays, your Neve Campbell, who became a Scream Queen all because of this franchise and has been in every single film except for the 6th one. Courtney Cox, who was a mega star on Friends, has been in every single one of these movies as well as Gale Weathers. And Dewey, played by David Arquette, pretty much became a household name as people would actually go watch movies with him in it just because he had been a mainstay in the Scream series. Now we know he met his fate in Part 5, which seemed fitting, and it was one of those deaths where it was time for someone in the big group of 3 to go. But David Arquette's acting in the 5th movie was so good that when it happened, you were like, damn it, this is the best performance I think he's ever given on screen. So that type of acting within the series has been at a high level the entire time. And like I said, the writing has been top-notch the entire time, and the directing has. So even when the 4th one came out, which is a very hit-or-miss film for people, I actually like the 4th film a lot. Because it's a little more brutal side of Ghostface, and it is a lot bloodier, and it's fun. And then we had the 5th and the 6th one, which still under new directing. The directing was done very well. I think his Radio Silence did a good job. The storyline writing that went along with it also stayed in line to where these movies don't feel out of place from the other 4. So one thing you know when you go to theaters to watch a Scream movie is you're going to get a very solid film, because they have yet to give us a movie that when you walked out, you just hated it. I didn't like the ending of Part 6, which left me with a little sour taste when I left, because I felt like it was a copycat of the 2nd one, in a sense. If you want to see my review on that, you can check it out. I kind of give my feelings as to why it was still a very good movie, but I felt like it didn't hit the ending. And I usually love the endings of the Scream movies. I mean, it's obviously the 1st one. The 2nd one is okay. The 3rd one's the least favorite of mine, and I love the ending of the 4th one. And the 5th one was decent too. But there's always a solid ending. But off of that little rant, I forgot to mention in here is also the fact that inside of the Scream movies, they've created an 8 series of Stab movies, which is movies based on the real life events that happened in Woodsboro. So they take a series that's based on true events from their series that's not based on true events. It gets a little wishy-washy, but they make it work. And for the third movie, that was the entire center point, was the fact that they were killing off the cast of Stab 3 for the movie. That's what was happening. So they intertwined these Stab movies. We saw the Stab 1 opening scenes in the opening scene of Scream 2. And then you get a lot of real-life books and stuff like that. So the way that it plays is very, very realistic to how real life would be, while throwing in there the little ham it up of what is going on in horror so we can all have fun. That is everything I would say to try to build a case for Ghostface. Now I'm going to hit a point on why most people would not put Ghostface on the Mount Rushmore. And that's because it's a costume. These are real people. These people really die at the end of the movies, and somebody else plays the character of Ghostface. So I can understand why that would be a reason to leave Ghostface off of your Mount Rushmore if that's how you feel, because Freddy's Freddy, Jason's Jason, Michael's Michael, Chucky's Charles Lee Ray, Pinhead is Pinhead, Pennywise is Pennywise. But in Ghostface, it's Billy and Stu, it's Billy's mom, it's Mickey, it's Sidney's long-lost brother, it's Sidney's cousin, it's a movie fan, it's the new Sam's new boyfriend, it's the father and brother and sister of the killer in the last movie. People have a hard time wanting to put a character on the Mount Rushmore when it's not the same person the entire time. But the voice on the voice box is the same person the entire time. It's not the same actor playing the Ghostface in the costume in every single movie, but in a lot of them, it is the same person. And in real life, I mean, we know Robert Englund was Freddy Krueger, but there was a multitude of people who played Michael Myers. There was a multitude of people who played Jason. So it's kind of a iffy thing there, you know. It's up to you as a person whether or not you can look past that. But I think the killer reveals is part of the reason what makes Scream so fun and exciting and why people love watching it. Because you have to figure out who the killer is. Including the fact that since Scream 1, everybody's been waiting to see if Stu Macher returns. Because his death was never confirmed. Or it was confirmed. There's about 100 videos on YouTube alone where you can check to see what people's thoughts are on whether or not Stu Macher is dead or alive. My thoughts are, we're going to see him in Scream 7. Scream 7 is kind of like a new trilogy onto this. And the trilogies always go back to the original. And in this one, I think it's going all the way back to the original. I think we get Matthew Lillard. I think we get Neve Campbell. Obviously, we're going to get flashbacks of Skeet Ulrich since the core four don't ever die. I'm hoping that we see a little bit more brutality and a lot more stuff. But that's a video for another day when I'm going to break down Scream 7's what I expect to see happen, what we know so far, and what I would love to see happen. And usually what we come up with as fans is way better than what they show us on the screen. But hey, that's a fun game we like to play. Alright, so does Ghostface make it into your Mount Rushmore? For me, I'm making a case for him. But he doesn't make it up there for me, essentially. He's not on that level. But next one, you guys leave in the comments, and I'm going to pick somebody from the comments to do a case for why they belong on the Mount Rushmore. So don't forget to like, subscribe, tell me who you want me to make a case for in the next video. And until then, rest in peace.